I trusted her with everything, my heart, my home, my future. But the moment I uncovered the truth, I realized the real danger had been sleeping beside me all along. Hey there, friends. Thanks for tuning in. This one's something else. He waited 4 full days before finally calling me, 2 more than I had expected. Honestly, I thought I'd hear from him much sooner. When the phone rang, his voice came through smooth as ever, slick like oil on glass. Tom, let's be reasonable about this. I'm sure we can find some middle ground we'll both be happy with. Why don't you stop by the office? We'll sit down like gentlemen and hash things out. That was classic Stan. Except he hates being called that, insists on Stanley every single time. So, naturally, I leaned into it. Stan, I already know exactly what I want, I said, keeping my tone flat. I could hear the sharp breath he took, that tiny crack in his composure. But he reined it in quickly. That's just wonderful, Tom, he said through clenched teeth. I really do respect a man who can keep a level head. What is it you're asking for, then? We'll have it ready by the time you swing by. I didn't hesitate. I want your daughter to abide by the prenuptial agreement, exactly as it's written. No changes. No loopholes. Got that, Stan? And as for stopping by, well, let's just say I won't be stepping foot back into that mausoleum you call a house. Not now, not ever. That cracked his mask. His temper flared, and whatever warmth had been in his voice was gone. You ungrateful hick, he snapped. I told her you were just after money, but would she listen? No. And now I've got to clean up the disaster she made, just like back in college. You'll live to regret this, you no-class bum. He was practically shouting by the end of it. I let a moment pass, just long enough to let the silence land, and then replied with syrupy sarcasm, Stanley, are you threatening me? That's disappointing. I always held you in such high regard. We despised each other from the start, but I figured I'd lean into the act. Just to twist the knife a little. There was a pause, dead air, and then he burst again. This is your last chance, he spat. $1 million. Tax-free. Divorce her after the election and we all walk away clean. I pretended to think for a second. $1 million, huh? Let me think. No. Not a chance, Stan the man. And then I hung up while he was still mid-rant. The guy had completely lost touch with reality. His career was circling the drain, his golden family image shattered, and the press was already sniffing around. Still, he thought he could throw money at the problem and make it vanish. Right after that, I backed up the recording and sent 3 copies to trusted spots. Couldn't take any chances. Stan might be unhinged, but he wasn't stupid. He'd come at me if he thought he could still salvage this. But it was too late. That ship had sailed. Out on the balcony, she was a mess. Scratches up and down her arms, clearly hammered and unable to even stay upright. When I tried to lift her, she screamed in pain. Her ankle had swollen up badly, probably broken. I laid her back down gently, tried to make her as comfortable as possible, then went to find help. I rang the front doorbell and knocked hard, but no one answered. The layout of the place made it impossible to get around the side yard. So I came back to her, feeling that sinking weight of helplessness settle in. And then, just as I was figuring out my next move, there was a knock on my own door. 2 women were standing there. One of them on crutches. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Since I run my small business out of my home, I figured the 2 women at the door might be potential clients. I stepped outside and asked, Good afternoon. Can I help you ladies with something? The older woman offered a warm, easy smile and replied in a gentle voice, You sure can. You can invite us in so we can thank you properly. Still a bit puzzled, I stepped aside and gestured for them to come in. Thank me? For what, exactly? That's when the younger woman chuckled, genuinely amused. He doesn't remember us, Mom. I figured watching me wipe out like that would have left more of an impression. It hit me then. She was the same girl who'd taken a tumble off the balcony a while back. Her face was familiar now, and I could see she was doing much better. I smiled, realizing how time had softened the memory. We made some small talk, and as they turned to leave, the young woman paused at the door. Oh, and I almost forgot. My dad would like you to come to dinner on Saturday. 7 o'clock sharp. I'm sure you remember the house. Before I could process the invitation, I found myself shaking my head. I appreciate the offer, I said sincerely, but I've already got something lined up for that night I can't back out of. Their expressions shifted instantly, pure surprise. Both of them just stood there, stunned as if I'd declined a royal decree. Finally, the older woman, who introduced herself as Greta, broke the silence. Do you know who my? But she was cut off by the creak of the front screen opening. An older man, slim and quick on his feet despite his age, stepped onto the porch. Hey, Uncle Jack, the girl called out. Just checking in. Anyone else made it up yet? Jack laughed. Yeah, Ron and Cassie are up with the kids. Bob's here too. June couldn't swing it, but Fred, Celeste, and their gang made it. Most of the crew's already up the hill. You heading up too? She asked. Jack smiled but shook his head. Nah, I'm laying low tonight. Too old for chasing kids around a bonfire. I noticed a car tucked discreetly behind the house and couldn't help myself. Too old, or maybe got a better offer? I teased, raising my voice slightly. How's the evening treating you, Marie? A voice drifted out from inside, half laughing, half dreamy. Just fine for stargazing, thanks. The temperature had dropped a little, and I suggested it might be time to slip out back where it was warmer. Don't worry, I said, giving a small grin. You're safe with me. Marie grinned back and slid into the sleeping bag beside me with a little giggle. She leaned in just enough to make me forget what I was trying to look at in the sky. In a playful whisper, she teased, Yeah, but who's going to protect you from me? I tried to refocus on the stars, but with her warmth next to me and the smell of her hair so close, my concentration was toast. I was just about ready to give up when I felt a small tug on the back of my shirt. It was Lily, the 6-year-old daughter of Cassie. She looked up at me with those big hopeful eyes and said, Uncle Danny, if she says yes, can Eve come back next time? I glanced at Eve, who looked a little unsure, like she didn't want to overstep. I smiled. If she agrees when I ask her, then I'd love that. Celeste, standing nearby, smiled. Eve did too. That kind of smile that tells you the answer was already yes. I made a quiet mental note to keep an eye on my sister-in-law. Laura's always meant well, but I could tell she had taken my single status as some kind of personal mission. Like fixing me up was her unfinished life's work. When Eve and I got back to my place, she went straight for another shower. A few minutes later, she came out wearing the same jeans and tee from the day before. Her hair still damp, framing her face in soft waves. There was something about how casual she looked that made her even more striking. Later that afternoon, we had a small gathering over at my brother-in-law's place. At one point, I was introduced to this guy, Kevin, I think, who apparently thought he was stronger than he looked. He went in for a classic macho handshake, the kind where you're supposed to win by crushing the other guy's fingers. He gave mine a squeeze. I didn't flinch. Instead, I gave just a little more pressure back. Nothing crazy, just enough. His eyes widened for a split second, then narrowed like I'd ruined his routine. He was expecting the usual smile and wince combo most people gave him, but I just let go and carried on with the conversation. A few folks noticed. He looked around awkwardly, then just shrugged it off. I found out later he told them he took it easy on me. Right. That night Eve and I had lunch back at my place. Simple stuff but delicious. I was on my best behavior, trying not to make a mess of things, especially since she seemed to be enjoying herself so much. I got her another drink, a fresh bowl of ice cream, and even helped her to the bathroom when she needed it. Normally, I hate pausing a movie once it's rolling. Living alone gets you in that rhythm, but her company made it all worth the stops and starts. By the end of the film, she was misty-eyed, curled up against my shoulder, holding my hand like she didn't want to let go. Afterwards, we stayed up talking. She told me she had just finished college with a degree in art. I surprised her by pulling out some prints I had, pieces by Stark, Kneller, and a few Van Gogh reproductions I kept tucked away. I told her I liked Monet and Manet just fine, but Van Gogh? There was something deeper in his brushwork that always got me. Even though we came from different worlds, her background steeped in legacy and old money, mine built from quiet independence, I never once thought about walking away. Something about her. It just felt right. Over time, Celeste and Eve grew close too. Close enough that when Eve asked if she could bring Amy along on our next outing, Celeste said yes without hesitation. That time, it was my turn to choose the destination. I picked the State Symphony, figured it was different, a little classy, and something I'd always wanted to do. Eve handled the tickets, using her family's membership to get us in. The day before, she picked up Celeste and Amy and took Amy shopping for a dress. Later, Celeste told me she felt out of place in some of those stores, the kind where a price tag is more of a suggestion than a rule. Still, Eve helped Amy pick out something beautiful, something that was elegant but still appropriate for her age. Modest, but with a little sparkle. The kind of dress that makes a little girl feel like royalty for the night. Before I tucked her in, Amy looked up at me with sleepy eyes and asked if we could have breakfast together the next morning. I promise, I said with a smile. Just you and me. I told her, gently but firmly, if we lie down together we're going to end up making love, and I don't think I can handle that. I already see where this is going, and I know it's going to end with a broken heart. But she didn't say a word, just curled up next to me, resting her head against my chest. What started as a simple goodnight kiss, one of those soft, sweet gestures, turned into something deeper. It wasn't rushed or heated. No, this was slow, tender, and intimate. We made love, but not in the way people rush into things. It was thoughtful. Like we both knew the moment would mean more later, no matter what happened next. Afterwards, she slipped off to the bathroom to freshen up and came back wearing the old t-shirt she'd slept in the night before. She tossed me a smile and said, "You might want to put your pants back on. A certain little girl tends to wake up before we do." The next thing I remember, the couch shifted beneath me, startled me really, and I realized she'd leapt up and darted into the bedroom. Moments later, she came out wearing an old satin nightgown, one of those timeless things that somehow looked more graceful with age. Then she disappeared into Amy's room. When I finally got up, it was almost noon, they were both gone. Later that day she came back, and the moment I stepped into the hallway she slapped me. Hard. Not just physically either. It was the kind of moment that stings twice, once on the cheek and again in the chest. "You say you love me," she said, her voice trembling, "and yet you think I'm just some spoiled rich girl out looking for a thrill? That this is all some game to me?" She took a shaky breath. "Damn you, Cole. Straight to hell. I'm going back to my mom's for a bit. You figure out what it is you want. And just so we're clear, if I had known that's what you truly believed about me, I would have never opened my heart to you." And just like that she was gone. I knew what I'd said, what I'd implied, was unfair. The truth is Eve had given a lot of herself, more than anyone really knew. Her family had deep roots, and during election season she'd even donated generously, quietly, to causes I cared about. There were a few sizable checks, even a personal loan or two that had helped keep my business running. The money officially became hers when she turned 25, but she'd been meeting with her financial advisors for years. They didn't have final say, but they paid close attention to her wishes, if only to keep her trust with them when she gained full control. Her grandfather had been smart. He made sure her father never touched a dime of it. Probably the best decision he ever made. But her father? He never gave up trying to tear us apart. When he got his hands on the prenup, drafted long ago under pressure and assumptions, I knew he'd use it. He called me up one evening. "Did you read it?" he asked, not even bothering with small talk. "No," I told him. "Just tell me what it says." He gave a heavy sigh. "It's about 30 pages. But to summarize, it's brutal. If you two split, she gets it all. Her money, your business, full custody of any kids you might have. It's stacked completely in her favor." I didn't respond right away. Then I drove over to pick up a copy, took it home and stared at it. After a few minutes, I grabbed a thick black marker and wrote across the cover in bold letters, "No way in hell." I made a copy for myself, then sent the original back. When I showed it to Eve, she was speechless. Just held the pages in her lap, eyes scanning but not reading. When she finally looked up, she just nodded and said, "Okay." After we found our footing again, I let her choose the house. The property we picked had a gentle slope, perfect for what she envisioned. She worked hand in hand with the builders, laying out the design with such care you'd think she was the architect. She wanted the bedrooms upstairs and a full basement down below. Brick and stone made up most of the structure, strong and solid. 2 fireplaces, one for warmth, the other, she said, just for charm. Eve reviewed every detail with me top to bottom, wanting to make sure it wasn't just a house, but our home. I agreed to her vision, especially when it came to the basement. She had big dreams for that space, part playroom, part entertainment center, all built with our future children in mind. She talked about birthday parties, holiday sleepovers, game nights, things that made me picture a home filled with laughter and movement. It was clear she was already imagining what our life would look like, right down to the details. That naturally led us into one of those late-night talks about how many kids we'd want. She was leaning toward a full house, 3 or maybe even 4. I was a little more reserved, but the way she painted the picture, it was hard not to get swept up in it. Somewhere along the way, her father got wind of all this domestic bliss and decided it was the perfect opportunity to pull me deeper into his world. Politics. "If you're talking about me, Stanley," I said dryly, "I've got no problem supporting you within reason." That lit up his face like a Christmas tree. "Good, good," he said, clapping me on the shoulder like we were old buddies. "I'll need you both to accompany me to a few events now and then. The committee might even want you to be in a couple of commercials. You think you can handle that?" I didn't like the man. Never had. But I loved Eve, and that meant occasionally stomaching her father. I shrugged and gave a careful reply. "As long as it doesn't eat up too much of my time, sure." He accepted that answer without missing a beat. Later, when we were working on a regional business initiative, something that was supposed to benefit small companies across 2 counties. Things got complicated. Each county wanted one of their own in charge, and it was turning into a tug of war. Why not have co-chairs? I suggested. One from each county. That way each team can focus on their own area and still collaborate through weekly meetings. The idea caught on fast. They formed a joint committee with 3 members from each side. A well-known businessman from the neighboring county was nominated and lobbied for by their group, and accepted. To my surprise, they appointed me as the co-chair for our side. The project started gaining momentum. Donations came in, people volunteered their time, and folks we'd never met offered to help. I even gave a local radio interview, my first dip into public speaking outside of business. What started as a thank you message turned into a weekly 3-day update slot. Suddenly, I was the public face of something bigger than I'd expected. But when it came time to present the plan to the other counties' board, things didn't go as smoothly. The head Republican and the lead Democrat both had their own turf to protect, and they were suspicious of anything that smelled like an outsider taking over. The committee chair, sensing the political roadblocks, turned to his team. "Billy, get us set up with a proper office, conference room, phones, computers, the whole setup. Whatever you think we'll need," he said. Then he turned to 2 others. "Jerry, I want you to look into grant history, see what kind of funding we've gotten in the past and what's still out there. And Z." He gave him a nod. "Start mapping out who's on our side. State and federal. Figure out which politicians are supportive, which ones are sitting on the fence, and who's going to give us trouble. Let's get ahead of it." We were neck deep in the weeds, but it was working. Momentum was shifting. And at one critical meeting, I found myself casting the deciding vote, something I never expected and something that changed how people saw me in that room. Technically, I didn't need to cast a vote. The committee had reached a consensus, but that didn't stop things from getting complicated on the home front. Tension started rising when it became clear that Richard, Eve's father, was one of the leading voices pushing against the renewal of the grant. The same grant we'd all worked so hard to advocate for. He pulled me aside one evening and tried to coax me into softening our campaign. "Ease up," he said. "You don't want to alienate people who matter." But I didn't back down. In fact, I doubled down. When we released a full list of all the state and federal politicians who supported and opposed the grant renewal, his name was right there in the against column. I got asked about it during one of my radio interviews. "How do you feel about your father-in-law being one of the top opponents?" I was ready for it. I'd practiced that answer with the PR folks. "I respect everyone's right to their own views," I said. "But this isn't about politics or family. This is about what's right for the community. And I stand by that." I tried to distance myself from the drama. Quietly, I focused on my company. Word spread about the quality of our work and how fairly we priced our services. The controversy faded, at least in the professional world. Business was booming. I had 4 crews working across the region. I rarely handled cable installations myself anymore, except during emergencies. Most of my time went into managing, supervising, and bidding jobs. Eve was proud, genuinely proud, of everything I'd built. She started nudging the conversation toward starting a family. One day, on a whim, I called her into the bathroom and, without saying a word, I flushed her birth control pills down the toilet. She burst into tears. Happy tears. She cried for 2 hours, holding on to me like she couldn't believe it was real. Then she dried her eyes and started researching baby names. 6 months later, she was pregnant. Glowing, yes, but exhausted too. The non-stop campaigning for her father was taking a toll, and it was becoming hard to watch. One night, I drove out to the small town where Richard was holding a rally. I didn't announce myself. I just showed up. Found Eve backstage, looking pale and worn down. "Babe," I said, gently cupping her face. "This has to stop. You're pushing yourself too hard. I'm scared for you and for the baby. Your dad's either going to win or he's not. But this isn't worth it. Come home. Let's build a fire, sit on the porch. Let me take care of you." She leaned into me like she was trying to breathe for the first time in days. For a moment I thought she'd say yes. But then she whispered, "I can't. I promised Dad I'd stay until the election." I was about to respond when something struck me hard from behind. Everything went dark. When I woke up, I was strapped to a chair in a dim hotel room. My arms were bound behind me, my chest aching, and blood dripped slowly from my mouth. Richard stood there, grinning like he'd just won something. Well, he said, dragging a chair in front of me. "Glad you're awake. I've wanted to do that for a long time." He sat down and leaned in close. "I can't stand you. I had everything planned for Eve. The right husband. The right future. Someone who'd elevate the family name, not some blue-collar nobody from nowhere. But you? You wrecked it all. He slapped me again. Art. My vision blurred. But, he said, smiling now, you could still fix this. Folks love a good OL country boy. Might help sway a few votes. You play your part and maybe this whole nightmare becomes a memory. I didn't respond. I could barely breathe. Eventually, one of the security guards noticed the way I was struggling, my chest rising in short, shallow gasps, lips stained with blood. A cracked rib had pierced my lung. I was drowning in my own blood and they hesitated. Even with my life slipping away, they waited a full 20 minutes before finally calling an EMT. Before that, they roughed me up even more. Tossed me down the back stairwell of the hotel like garbage. They figured no one would believe me anyway. I woke up in the ICU, hazy and hurting in more places than I could count. The operation had gone well enough, but the damage had been serious. Internal bleeding, broken ribs, a punctured lung. Every breath burned. The doctor and nurses were polite, but I could tell they were uneasy around me. Like I was radioactive. The lead physician came in with a clipboard and a carefully measured tone, starting to explain the extent of my injuries and how long my recovery might take. That's when Agent Jerry walked in. He wasn't just there to check on me, he was building a case. He laid it out plainly. Charges were being considered: kidnapping, assault, reckless endangerment, and a whole list of others. On top of that, the drug cocktail they'd used on me without consent might qualify for attempted manslaughter under federal law. When the doctor heard that, he visibly paled. Tried to demand a lawyer, tried to reclaim some authority in the room. But Jerry didn't flinch. "You're not under local jurisdiction anymore," he said. "This is being handled under Homeland Security guidelines due to the political implications. You don't get to call anyone." That took the wind right out of him. Then came the kicker: whoever flipped first would get the deal. That pressure cooker of silence and uncertainty was meant to break someone. Fast. The next day they drove me out to the campaign rally, the one Richard had been planning for weeks. I arrived in a wheelchair wrapped in bandages, still tender from the trauma. But I insisted on bringing my cane. I wanted to be standing when I looked him in the eyes. They kept me backstage during his speech. It was all scripted, of course. Every question at the Q&A had been screened and approved ahead of time. Richard had his answers memorized like a good actor hitting his cues. Just as the press began packing up, I stood up. That's when Fred, a local deputy on loan to the SBI for security, quietly stepped beside me. "You sure about this?" he asked. I nodded. Back home, my family had already moved in with me. Celeste and the boys, even little Amy. Vivian, Eve's sister, visited almost every day. She and Amy took turns helping with whatever I needed: food, errands, company. One afternoon, Amy caught me holding a photo of our wedding. My eyes were red, but I didn't even notice the tears anymore. She came close and gently said, "Dad?" I didn't answer. Just kept staring at the picture. Our daughter was 11 now, and the older she got, the more she looked like her mother. Then, without saying a word, she took my hand. I felt the warmth of it and something in me cracked. Through all this, I wasn't alone. My attorney, David Ellison, stood by me like a stone wall. When a sleazy tabloid hinted we were part of some secret society or shadow organization, he crushed the paper with a storm of lawsuits. Eventually, they printed a full retraction and made a sizable donation to the nonprofit David had founded. That organization? It was made up of volunteer attorneys from all over: civil, criminal, family law. They offered free legal aid to the community, educated folks about their rights, even organized park cleanups and local service projects. And Richard? He was finished. The statute of limitations spared him prison, but the fallout was unforgiving. By the time he turned 75, he was divorced, broke, and socially exiled. Even his own party wouldn't return his calls. Not long after, Eve began to spiral. The stress of everything, her father's disgrace, the pressure, the betrayal, caught up with her. She started acting out. Drinking. Experimenting with pills. I didn't recognize the woman I loved anymore, and it tore me apart. He couldn't let the truth come out, not without risking everything. So instead of facing the storm, Richard pulled strings from the shadows. He had people clean up the wreckage behind Eve. Made sure it never hit the papers, never touched his public image. She thought she'd left that world behind when she started college, thought she'd built enough distance. But her father? He dragged her back in, using force, leverage, and something far uglier: blackmail. He filmed her, monitored her, used her like a pawn. I didn't know all the details at first, but what I did learn later that day hit hard enough to drop me. The kind of betrayal that isn't hers alone, but still cuts like it is. That evening Celeste pulled me aside. "I'm going to see her," she said softly. "I want to look her in the eye and ask her why. Why she did this to you. Maybe if I hear it from her mouth, it'll hurt less." I nodded. I understood. Even Amy had started asking to see her mother again, begging really, but I couldn't allow it. Not yet. Not until I was sure Amy wouldn't be hurt all over again. "I'll call you later," Celeste said as she left. She did talk to Eve. And with Greta too. I never asked what was said. Celeste didn't share much. But she did mention something odd, that Eve's psychiatrist wanted to speak with me. Desperately. Practically begging, according to Celeste. For 3 days, Amy, Celeste, and Vivian kept gently pressing me to agree to it. I finally said yes. I had one demand. I needed Eve to acknowledge out loud that she had betrayed me. I wasn't asking for punishment, I just wanted the truth. Publicly. I needed to hear her say it. Not for revenge. For peace. When she refused, I had her assets frozen. Everything. Under the terms of the prenup, it was all mine now. I made it clear. All she had to do was admit the infidelity in a statement I approved, and everything would be restored. She could have it all back. But she wouldn't. She wouldn't do it. At that point, Greta had been released from the hospital, though she was still staying at a private clinic that specialized in trauma and recovery. It was more like a retreat than a hospital, high-end, quiet, remote. She could leave if she wanted, but they strongly discouraged it. Then one evening there was a soft knock at my door. When I opened it, there she was. She looked nothing like the woman I remembered. Pale. Frail. Eyes red from crying. The staff had sent along a tray, potatoes, pureed vegetables, gelatin for dessert. It looked more like baby food than dinner. I sat with her. Fed her, spoon by spoon, promising a kiss for every bite she managed to finish. She tried. Really tried. And I gave her every kiss I promised. A few extras too. Afterwards, I brought in a rocking chair and held her while we rocked gently. She leaned against me like she was clinging to the last solid thing in her life. Whenever she started to talk about what had happened, I stopped her. "Not yet," I whispered. "You need your strength first." She managed to whisper just once, "Tommy, I never cheated on you." Never. That's the one thing I swear. That's where I left it. The road back wasn't easy. It wasn't like a movie where everything ties up with a bow. You spent nearly 2 years in therapy, some of it alone, some of it with me. And even now, she sees her therapist every few months. Just to stay centered. There were long stretches where things between us were tense. Uncomfortable. Like strangers living in the same house. But we found our rhythm again, slowly. When things got heavy, when the silence turned sharp, we'd retreat into the nursery. Sit on the floor together. Just breathe. Sometimes we wouldn't say a word. We just needed to remember what we were fighting for. We got into a habit, Eve and I. After every hard conversation or therapy session, we'd leave holding hands, sometimes quietly, sometimes laughing. But always together. Almost every day we reminded each other, no more secrets. Always talk. Always trust. That became our anchor. We didn't rush back into our intimate life. In fact, we waited until Vivian was nearly 7 months old. When it finally happened, it was careful, tender. Like we were rediscovering each other for the first time. And in a way we were. By then, life had taken on a strange duality, part quiet domestic routine, part political whirlwind. The party we'd helped create had started as little more than a protest movement. But over time, it evolved into something more, something real. A viable third option in a political system that had stopped listening. Their success rate for candidates was over 90%, with most losses tied to scandals or hidden skeletons that had been missed in vetting. Eventually, we added an internal investigative unit to keep everything transparent. Emerson, one of the most respected political consultants in the game, came on board. He had already managed campaigns for 5 state officials, 3 U.S. senators, and 2 congressmen. His record stood at 11 wins, 3 losses. When Emerson and his team visited us, Eve greeted them like old friends. She remembered the better times, before the fractures, before the betrayals. They adored little Vivian. Billy, now married with 2 kids of his own, carried her around like a proud uncle. Zane, divorced and childless, gave her his old campaign pin to chew on. Jerry, still the sharpest guy in the room, kept his distance, but I knew he was watching everyone, always calculating. Not everyone welcomed our little uprising. The National Party saw us as a nuisance at first, but that changed once we started winning seats. After the federal scandal tied to the tea union, both sides began clamping down. But they couldn't shut us out, not with people like Jan running point for our team. We didn't just play by the rules. We defined them. Our legal team was relentless, making sure every form, every dollar, every handshake passed scrutiny. Every donation over $100 was posted publicly on our site. Full transparency. No backroom deals. No mystery donors. The biggest contributions came from those closest to me. Greta, Vivian, and John all gave the maximum allowed by law. Even Amy, now a teenager, made it her mission to organize neighborhood fundraisers and school events. I ran on a platform that was simple. No backdoor politics. No favors. Just results that serve real people. And for a time it worked. I turned down offers to climb higher, go national, take the stage. But when the term ended, I made good on the promise I'd made from the start. I went home. The calls and emails poured in. People from across the state begging me to stay, to keep fighting. But I knew it was time. During my farewell speech, I stood at that same podium where it all began and said, "Thank you for believing in me. But more than that, thank you for believing in yourselves." That's what this has always been about. This wasn't my movement. It was ours. And you've got everything you need to keep it going. And they did. That little hometown movement became a nationally recognized third party. One state even made headlines by allowing 2 of our candidates to run for federal office under our banner, and win. Even now, when people ask if I miss it, the lights, the crowds, the speeches, I tell them the truth. Nothing in politics compares to watching my daughter fall asleep in my arms, or seeing my wife smile at the life we rebuilt from ashes.